lot of people were frightened of us, but it was not how it was really. You know, we had this image of frightening old ladies and children and things with the motorbikes, but it wasn't like that at all. It was the newspapers. Newspapers hyped it up a terrific amount.
The Mods and Rockers were the first British moral panic. It was the first time you could get these headlines of the nation's teenagers being dangerously, horribly, frighteningly out of control. And the press loved it.
The press did play a small part in it, I suppose, or a large part. Because obviously when you're in the papers you want to read and see who's the face, who's the face who has been pulled in the back of the wagon. It did make good front coverage on a Tuesday morning after the bank holiday to pick a paper up and see mods throwing rockers through the railings at Brighton and things like this and running amok through the town centre, and it used to make it look bigger than what it sometimes really was. Without the press, no one would have heard about it, and it would have been fallen flat, I suppose.
It's difficult to say that the press actually exaggerated the conflict, but wow, they certainly got stuck in.
There was very little going on in the news at that period. You know, there were no particular wars. It's before Vietnam. Suez Crisis finished in the mid-50s. I think they were just short of copy.
They just couldn't wait for the bank holiday weekends to see what the Mods and Rockers, where they're going to end up and what they were going to do, and it made headline news in the 60s, because the news in the 60s was more about England than what it was of all the foreign countries that you get now on the news.
They're just trying to sell newspapers. Simple as that.
There are stories that press photographers went down bank holiday weekend and there'd be nobody running around, there'd be nobody shaking their fists in the air, and they would distribute £5 notes and say, look lads, can you just run along there and shout a lot? And that's probably true. If you were that age and your image was being built up in front of your eyes and you were asked to play up for the cameras, you would. Of course you would.
There was smaller things like that where people were asked to do things, possibly, and it made you out to look more of a villain than what you really were. Literally like holding a deck chair or having a bottle or a pint mug in your hand, looking like you're going to hurt someone else who's in an opposing group, a rocker or something like that.
They were looking for action shots, for photographs, people being assaulted and things of that kind. There were instances where we suspected that certain press photographers were virtually manufacturing a few situations which we were not happy with, but it's very difficult to prove anything like that. But we're pretty sure it did happen a few times with one or two unscrupulous press photographers.
Never saw any setups. Everything I saw was for rim. I'm not saying they didn't do it, but I didn't see it.
It was most certainly stoked by the press, certainly after the very first fracas on the beaches. The press had a huge hand in what went on after that. But I think it did the Mods and Rockers an awful lot of good. All these thousands of them running around on the beaches of southeast England, and the press attention made them what they became in popular mythology. Without the fights, you wouldn't have the Mods and Rockers mythology that you have now. Here in Carnaby Street, as in other big cities, the shops who are catering to mod or modish fashion fall into two groups. There's the big stores like Merck and a lot of the high street stores who have adopted mod motifs and use mod in their clothing in all sorts of ways. But then if you go up the little alleys, you found shops like the one here called The Face. And that's different because that is absolutely purist. That is pure mod. It's not sold out, be that a good thing or a bad thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing that you find Ben Sherman shirts in big high street department stores. I don't think that's a bad thing. But there is still room for the purists. And yet at the same time, the tourists who'll flock here will go straight to Ben Sherman or straight to Merck, and they'll get off the peg mod solutions.
Circles, my head is going round in circles. Brighton is then not just a piece of news in the UK in the 60s, it's then transported all around the world. It's ultimately one of the things that bring people to these shores and bring people to this cafe and bring people to Brighton.
Quadrophenia, of course, was the film that personified the mods and rockers of the day. Big popular film. A lot of people made a lot of money out of it, I believe.
The film was a very good film, very lifelike of what it was really like in Brighton in them days.
And people continue to make money out of things. They're still making money out of Jack the Ripper, aren't they, in London with Trixter and Whitechapel and places like that. They're still making money out of World War II.
At some point in the mid-80s, guys who'd been there the first time round appeared out of nowhere, looking, yes, a little older, but otherwise still the same, still in the black leather jackets, still wearing the quiffs, still riding the Tritons. And other stuff has come up around that. One of the best examples is the Ace Cafe.
It was at the tail end of '93 that a much older friend of mine who used to come here, he said to me, did I know that Ace shut in September '69? I thought, next year, '94, it's 25 years since it's closed. And that meant a reunion. And that reunion would be the key to getting this place reopened. From that moment on, that was my mission, to reopen this place. Some 12,000 bikes turned up here. And that, in effect, meant that I had evidence to show people, like the bank manager and whatnot, that actually there is interest and a demand that meant this should be reopened. There's a host of things that we sell, and that includes jackets, sweatshirts, t-shirts, stickers, badges, patches, and it's all as a consequence of people seeking to identify with something. It's no longer simply as a statement, I've been there, I've got the t-shirt. Put simply, what they're identifying with is that heritage of the mods, rockers, speed thrills, etc.
Well, I can walk down the street, Brighton or any other local town, and you can spot an old rocker, but you can't spot an old mod.
The mod scene seems to live on more than the rocker, and it just lives on.
At the time, you know, we were just growing up as teenagers. We didn't realise it, but I mean, we were part of a little bit of history.
I was an original mod in the early 60s, and along with myself and a lot of others, their motto is once a mod, always a mod, and I've still got friends dressing, walking and doing the same things, listening to the same music 40 years on.
I don't think it'll ever finish.
Walk up to me, yes you did now. Try and look so shy.